was one of her two phasers. I named it Irv Feinberg. Irv was the prop master who gave this one to Nichelle. Nichelle did a video some years ago in which she talked about how she acquired that.
I'm Nichelle Nichols, and I'd like to tell you about how I came to own my Star Trek phasers.
Now, Sky, tell us about your relationship with Nichelle.
So I was lucky enough to know Nichelle for over 30 years. We were actually business partners for 15 of those.
And did she ever talk to you about her phasers?
She did a couple times at least, well, more than a couple times. She loved them. They were her pride and joy. She had them actually hidden in her bedroom. And then she'd take them out now and then, a couple times at parties. And I've been shot by one of those phasers. I'm not sure which one it was, but she shot me. So
There you go.
I was wearing a red shirt that day. That's why that happened.
When I was with her, she would, actually, when we were doing the video, she would like go pew, pew, like to make some sound from her.
Yeah.
I don't remember being
it
that
was pew,
sound,
pew. No, she was very playful like that.
So you studied this phaser back in October of 2020 with Greg Jean.
Yeah, we both looked at it.
And I recall you compared this mid-grade to one of Greg's. How many mid-grades did Greg own?
I know he had a couple of them. One of them came from James Rugg, so that's bona fide. I mean, I was at his house and saw it there back when he retired, so
you were comparing.
I knew what it was supposed to be, that it was good.
You were comparing this phaser to a known phaser from Jim Rugg.
Right, right.
And you and Greg, we spent, what, about an hour or so, or 2 hours that day?
Yeah.
He saw a lot of fakes.
Oh, a lot. He was fooled by a few for a while, so was I.
I think that everyone in the industry was for a period of time by the Mark English phasers and props. But he determined, based on his experience and comparing this to the one he had, that this one was authentic.
Yeah.
And that was by looking at certain features of it, whether it be the nozzle. And
like the Mark English fakes have certain tells that we know about. There's certain areas you can look at and say, oh yeah, this is one of his. Yeah.
Now, Jon-Paul, you have seen Greg Jean's phaser, mid-grade, in person.
Yes.
And you've been to Mopop.
So I flew out to Seattle 3 separate occasions and became friends with Brooks Peck, who's the guy that sort of runs the Star Trek section of the museum, and was able to get some really detailed photographs and notes on the mid-grade they had, which was called the Zoll RX. And that was Paul Allen's phaser that he had loaned back to the museum. When Paul Allen died, his family pulled the phaser from the museum. Prior to that, though, I was able to really, really study it and get to know what made a real mid-grade at a really deep level of detail, which I've been able to apply that knowledge when I looked at this for you. And there are tells on that piece that match the Zoll RX, the West Coast mid-grade, and the Paradise Syndrome across the board. And that's what really convinced me that that was probably a real one. There were molds made from molds made from molds, and there could be variations, but this seemed very consistent, and there's distinct tells. There's a mark where the handle meets the body. The rear fins are recessed on this, the West Coast, the Paradise Syndrome, and the Zoll RX. I've never seen a copy with the fins recessed. It's about a 64th of an inch. But it's unique to a real one. All the fakes, they're flush because they haven't taken the time to fly to Seattle and really look at this stuff closely. The nozzles are always also very peculiar. It's a one-piece aluminum nozzle. The machining marks on it, and I won't get into the detail of it, are specific to the type of Bridgeport and Shaper machines that were used in the 1960s.
We still have, and there still always are, people who look at this phaser and say, well, it doesn't match identically the Zoll RX. It's like the West Coast mid-grade.
To me, a red flag is the paint matches exactly, the shapes match exactly, the machining matches exactly. When things start matching exactly, that tells me somebody's forged it. All the phasers I mentioned that are originals that we know are originals, no two of those have the exact same gray paint on them.
But sometimes they had different molds, and sometimes they would make a mold of an actual one that had already been made, and that creates variations.
Yeah, they did, because they'd say, "Oh, we need 3 more of these, like for tomorrow," and then these guys got to hustle in the shop. And
the nozzle, they made one at the beginning, a certain amount for each episode or each phaser, or did they make them from show to show sometimes?
Sometimes they made extra ones later, because they didn't have the money. I mean,
how do you know this?
Rugg and a couple of the others that worked on things said that they had a budget they had to keep to, and you may not going to get the money to do this. And of course, these things have been repaired a bunch of times too. It'd get dropped, thrown around, whatever, and they'd repair it, and that changed it. So what we see today has been through a lot of changes since when it was in front of the cameras.
Even the existing mid-grades, the nozzles on every single one of them is slightly different. No two are alike. This does not match any of the ones that we know about that are originals, which again, if it did match, I would get suspicious, because that would tell me somebody just copied one.